Hi there, so welcome to this first video for COMP3218 at the University of Southampton. My name's Dave Millard and I'm here with...
Adrian Chapman, a lecturer on the course.
And Tom Blount, another lecturer on the course.
So we're going to be having a look at a couple of the students' games. Tom, do you want to say a little bit about what we asked them to do this time?
Absolutely. So for this coursework we asked our students to create a small game prototype with a really clear core dynamic and a way of tutorialising that to the player.
Brilliant. So let's have a look at our first game. So this game is Candy Escape.
Okay, so we got some lovely background music. We've got a lovely title screen. Let's jump into it.
Yeah, nice little menu.
Looks like I need to get the key to open the door. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, cool. Nice little integrated tutorial. So
Can you select the key?
what happens if I select a different square just to be awkward? Aha! So it doesn't force me to pick that one, I can pick a different one. But okay, let's go back to the one they suggested first. Ah, and I can't actually change that now.
Okay.
So I've been difficult already. So select a leaf, they change the direction of the player when he moves. Okay, so pick a leaf, let's pick this one. Now add more leaves. Okay, so now I can... Alright, now I can go back and do it properly. So press play when you're ready to start.
Okay.
Okay, so the door's open, but I haven't added enough leaves yet, so we're just going to keep bouncing here forever. So I can't...
So this game, so I didn't see this one in the expo that we did. So this game is essentially a kind of a programming puzzle game, right?
It looks that way, yeah. So I can't put one... Hang on. Can I get rid of leaves? I don't think I can, because I actually want to go there and then
up there,
there,
yeah.
right?
Okay, but you had plenty of leaves for this one.
The more candy,
so
the better.
Count down for each one.
We've got 3 stars, 1
I
candy.
like that they made you, I mean, obviously there was an obvious answer to that, and by getting the good one, you got the candy, which said candy is good, right? They placed it well for that little tutorial.
Yeah. So now they've introduced... so we haven't got as many leaves this time, and they've introduced these, I'm guessing, holes?
Looks like holes.
Looks
so
like holes. I'm going
yeah.
to try and avoid them and see what happens. Okay, so I can't go down or left, but that should be fine. So go there, go there, go there, go there, and then go there. So exactly enough leaves to get everything right, hopefully. So I think you can both hear the audio for this now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they've got some really good audio feedback for when, like, if I click on this and I can't actually place it, I get some really nice feedback as well.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So here we've got... So now we've got multiple candy. So presumably I wonder if the stars thing is based on number of moves or based on how much of the candy you get.
I'd assume it's based on the extra candy, but who knows. There. And then...
Down.
No, because then I can't go left.
Gone the wrong way.
And the problem is I don't know how to...
You've got to restart in the top left-hand corner, haven't you?
I think that cost me a life, though.
Oh, does it?
Oh, I'm going to have to use it. Yeah, that cost me a life.
Okay. Right.
Okay, let's try going this way first. So that
while
way.
Tom is solving this puzzle, would we like to start talking through...
Yeah, should we go through? Yeah, so we've got a set of criteria we're going to go through. Let's do that. So the first one is going to be the presentation, which is the graphics and the audio and the information design. So what do we think about that?
I think it's really well done. They have both nice audio that there's not only background, but there's the tinks and the pinks as they pick things up. And the graphics are cohesive and of the same genre feel. I think it's very, very nicely put together, this one.
It is, isn't it? I think the graphics are really appealing. The audio is just about right. Kind of. What about the information design? We've got there's quite a lot they're telling us, but it's fairly effective, right? We've got the kind of lives in the top right-hand corner. We've got the feedback on how many controls we've got. We've got the level information, the number of candies we've currently collected.
Yeah.
Although
the only thing that I'm not clear on, and maybe it's because Tom is trying to be uber efficient, is Tom, could you solve a puzzle without collecting like lots of candy? Just get a key and go to the door. What does it do to stars? I'm curious about that star relationship.
Yeah, so I'm skipping ahead slightly, but I think I found a slight bug because I can't change where I put down the leaves, unfortunately. So I'm gonna have to kill myself, and then we'll try again, but without getting the.
So I had the same comment about the candy. So you've got that little candy symbol in the top. It says ×0, and presumably as you collect the candy, that will go up. But yeah, it's not quite clear. So like, is it 0? In this case, it's 0 out of 1. But
Sorry.
on the ones where you had 4 sweets, is it 0 out of 4, or is it 0 out of 3? And you can get any 3 of the 4? Or... So that's the only thing I would say on the information.
Sorry, just to jump back to the information design, it's not a bug, it's a bit of information design I didn't quite get. So I can't move my square if I click elsewhere. I have to click on the square and then click elsewhere. Which, now that I know it, sort of makes sense, but...
Yeah, just caught you out a little bit. So, okay, well, let's think about each one of those. So, for information design, I think kind of, we might say what? All key information is shown? Is it shown clearly?
I think it's shown clearly. I think the okay, so the stars are definitely related to the candy.
So you got 0 out of 1.
And it's 0 out of 1. So in that case, yeah, it showed you how many you did actually get. So now that we've kind of, I think that was more of us kind of debugging and understanding. I actually think it is pretty clear. Really, really well done on the information design, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the only thing, isn't it? Because the number of sweets is not necessarily equal to the number of stars.
Yeah.
So that's the only difficulty. So yeah, I think, well, let's have a look. So for presentation, excellent would be all key information is shown clearly, consistent, effective and appealing graphics, and complementary and appealing effects and music. And I think, to be honest, it kind of, I think for the graphics and audio, it definitely hits those levels.
Oh, absolutely.
The information design, maybe just halfway between excellent and good because of the issue with not quite understanding.
Agreed.
What you need to collect, but I mean, it doesn't really affect the way in which you play the game, as it were.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. So the next one is meaningful play. So this is essentially the mechanics, the controls, and whether or not there are any bugs in there.
Well, I'm certainly playing it, and I'm certainly... so, yeah, I found some of it a little fiddly, but once I realised how it worked, I'm happy saying it's not a bug, it's just me not quite grokking it. But at the minute, yeah, like, it controls pretty well. Like, the setting stuff up and then pressing play is quite satisfying.
So I think the only thing I'm not I feel like there's a slight tension or slight missed opportunity here is, so far Tom's been able to solve these puzzles. Now, is it just that they are easy and Tom is particularly clever at these puzzles with the exact number of leaves that are given? So are we seeing, like, what is the penalty for using more leaves, or yeah, I feel like there's, and this is always one of these problems with these types of games, right? The puzzle games or the spatial puzzle games, where how do we know that he doesn't have, is there an optimal, or what's the incentive for using less leaves and getting more candy?
I would make the assumption that for earlier levels they're just more generous with leaves.
Yeah, so, I think it'd be interesting to see what happens as you go on. So for later levels, I mean, the other thing is as far as I can tell, I suppose you could just go straight to the exit. But very often with these types of games, there's a kind of there's a decision about how you solve the puzzle. And there's a simple solution that gets you fewer things and a harder solution that gets you everything.
Yes.
And maybe we're on level 5 now, so... We're all entranced by Tom. solving the
Yes,
puzzle.
we got sucked in. We got sucked in.
Well, let's think
Let's
about
go
that.
back to the question of meaningful play. I actually do think there is meaningful play here.
Yes.
Tom gets to make decisions about leaf usage and going straight to the door versus candy pickup.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so in terms of the actual mechanics of the game, what have we got? We've got the blue leaves. We've got the holes. We've got the green leaves. We've got the different candy. So I think there's a reasonable set of mechanics that they've brought to play. I'll be interested to see if there's any other elements they bring into the puzzle later on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only a prototype, so we didn't ask for a huge number of levels.
No.
But it strikes me that it feels like it's ready to have another element.
Yep.
So
yeah, candy, key, holes, green leaf, blue leaf. And your reset. So I didn't do this properly. I'm going to kill myself so that I can start over again.
Yeah.
The controls, Tom, as you said, are pretty good. I mean, other than that little confusion about clicking on the thing to unlock it once you've placed it.
Yeah, I think it would be nice if you could remove leaves that you've already placed, because then when I reset the level, you could show me how I had it before, and then I can decide to sort of make changes to it.
Yeah.
Because when I reset now, I have to remember what I got wrong the first time.
Yes.
But
presumably, once you press play, you can't fiddle with the.
Yeah, I don't think so. Although, actually, let's try that. Can I sort of make plans as I go? No.
No. Which I think is fine.
Which is fair, yeah.
Okay, so in terms of this, good would be a set of complementary mechanics, reasonable set of smooth usable controls, and the game is reasonably complex, but there are infrequent minor bugs.
Yep.
So I think it's at least that. So excellent would be a wide set of complementary mechanics, reasonable set of intuitive and smooth usable controls, and the game is reasonably complex with no obvious bugs.
So I feel like we are reaching the wide set of mechanics. I get that this is a small prototype, but we do. We've got green leaves, we've got blue leaves, we've got holes, we've got candy, we've got keys that open door, and we've got your kill yourself to restart. And
controls seem pretty good.
Yep.
I mean, they are fairly intuitive. I mean, there's we've not had a lot of struggling around with what to do. So I think perhaps excellent across the board for meaningful play. I think it's. I think Tom's silence is quite telling, right?
I'm stuck.
He's engaged in the game.
Engaged in the game.
Like, it's always good when one of us goes very quiet because it means we're definitely trying to play.
What's the next category, Dave?
So now we're kind of getting to the brief. So basically, what we asked them to do was essentially create a series of create a series of kind of levels where there were appropriate goals, risks, and rewards, and where there was some kind of pacing. So what do we think about the level design here?
You know, are we talking about levels or are we talking about tutorials? I think both. All right, so let's do levels. So I think actually the levels are really cute. We've only seen up to level 5, I think, at this point, but they are getting progressively harder. I do think it's only a prototype. Like, as Dave said, I'm ready for the next twist, but they were well thought through.
What about the goals, risks, and rewards of a game like this? And putting those kind of choices. This kind of goes back to this idea of having different ways to solve the puzzle. And I mean, it's quite a tough part of puzzle design, right? To try and get that working.
Yep.
So I mean, here. I think that's maybe. So I think you're right in terms of the pacing of these levels. I think they're kind of that they are rising over time and clearly getting more challenging as it's going. And they're introducing the elements, right? So you get the holes and you get the blue leaves. So that I think they've done a nice job there.
Yeah.
Goals, risks, and rewards.
I think there's a reasonable amount of it in terms of do you go for all of the candies or not.
Yep. You've got that element, so
And there's-
you could just go straight through, I guess.
So I kind of missed this out when we were talking about mechanics, but how do you feel about the live system?
I like it that you can choose to just kill yourself because this is not working. I thought it was going to. I mean, you wouldn't have pushed play if you didn't think it was going to work.
And the thing is, it's this sort of new element to this risk-reward thing, because now I have a lot more risk if I try something and it doesn't work out, particularly because I can't remove the leaves. I can't just sort of trial and error my way through it. I have to properly commit to something, or I have to restart the whole thing over. So I think, I'm not sure I like it, but I think they've definitely sort of considered it as, like you say, a balance and a risk-reward thing.
So good would be clear and coherent set of goals, risks, and rewards, and tension rises over time in a coherent pattern. So I think for the tension, I think they achieved that. The pattern being the kind of the release of the new elements of the game and the complexity of the levels. The goals, risks, and rewards, I think Tom just outlined that pretty well. So that's based around the life system and the reset, and the fact that you can't, once you place, right?
Yeah.
That's it. So for me, it feels it feels like it's hit that. So to get up to excellent, we'd be looking at a well-balanced set of goals, risks, and rewards, and sort of a particularly well-balanced pattern. Yeah, it's a slightly more difficult one with this type of game.
And it is. I think that's actually the game as opposed to this instance of the game, to be honest.
Yeah. So in terms of a well-balanced set of goals, risks, and rewards, I'm not. So I don't know. I get the feeling. I mean, for that one, Tom, you clearly went through and didn't collect the candy, right? But have you got to a level yet where you were seriously tempted to do that in order to get through the level?
So I mean, that level definitely. The previous level, kind of, because I couldn't remember my solution and I just wanted to get through it. I feel like if you had a level select screen that showed you have 1 star on this level and 3 stars, then that would really hammer that home, because it'd be a case of I want to go back and do this level and get all the candy that time.
Yeah. And in terms of the pacing, do you feel that it rises at the right kind of level?
Yeah, I think so. I think, again, that sort of slow introduction of mechanics and stuff sort of helps with that, but also the different amounts of candy, the different difficulty with the layout, the different amounts of leaves you've got. I think it works quite well.
So my feeling is for the level design that the kind of goals, risks, rewards part of it is probably is probably well. So it's at least good.
What would it need to be to be excellent?
So it basically, for both of them, it just depends on if we feel that they're particularly well balanced. So do we feel like the pacing is particularly good, that it progresses in exactly the sort of way that we'd expect? So for me, I think that the goals, risks, and rewards is probably good, because I'm not quite so clear that because you haven't got these multiple ways of solving the puzzle, or as Tom was saying, you can't look at the overall levels and see where you've got to and go back and improve. It feels that that's not quite up at the excellent level. But the pacing feels like it might be. It feels like they're adding in a number of elements. I mean, it's only a small number of levels, but that's what we asked them for, and they rise. You get both the elements and the complexity of the puzzles go up. So for me, perhaps level design is between good and excellent because of those reasons.
I'd be happy to say that, yeah.
Okay, so the other element that was in the brief was the tutorial. So we asked them to do a tutorial as part of the game, and that's kind of interesting in this case, because there's a few tutorial elements in level 1, and and then the game pretty much sort of teaches you
as you go. It's
As you go.
it's truly embedded.
So yeah, it's got that nice mix where at the start it's quite guided. It's click here, now click here, even though it doesn't actually force you to do those things, which arguably good, arguably possibly sort of breaks the flow of their tutorial a bit. But then yeah, sort of as you progress you get the, ooh, a blue leaf, I wonder what that is, and it's placed in such a way that you're going to interact with it, so you find out that not only does it move you, it then vanishes, and then you can sort of plan around that in the next level.
Yeah. But does it force you to, with the blue leaf, does it sort of force you to interact with that, or is that just something you experiment with?
I don't remember, but I think it's the next level, so we'll find out. I don't think it forces you to, but I think it'd be...
Right, yeah, it's right in front of you, right?
Yeah, I don't think you'd... But again, it's a... The sprite is similar to one that we've seen before. It's not harmful. We're likely to try and experiment with it. And like, we have a rough idea that it's probably going to move us left.
So in theory, you could go around it, right? But as you said, it's pretty clear from where it's placed that the intention is that you go onto it, right?
I don't know if you can.
What happens if you fall in that hole?
That is something we've not tested yet.
No, I just realized that.
Hole and find out. So yeah, I mean, I think they could have, they could have done it even more forcibly, but it's pretty clear. The other thing I wondered, did they ever tell us that the reset made you lose a life?
We found that out as we got stuck in a back and forth mode. Sorry. Oh, and we lost a life. Look at that. We got stuck in one of these back and forths, and we said, "Oh, put the reset button," and we watched it lose a life. Which, I think the only problem with that, and it's hard in one of these games again, is that it could have been on a much later level that we learned that if Tom hadn't really been poking at the game to see, what's going on here.
So I still think they've done a really good job with the tutorial. So the reason I was asking that is essentially for good it would be a gradual explanation of gameplay and controls fully aligned with play, right? And I'm like, yep, they've definitely done that. But for excellent, it's sometimes communicated through level design, and for prizeworthy, it's essentially communicated through level design all the way, right? And my feeling is here that they've sometimes communicated it through level design, but they've left a few things kind of implicit, right? So the only way of finding out what those holes do is to fall into them, right?
This is true, although I don't know. I feel like there are certain sort of cultural conventions around video games that can be assumed to a degree, like falling in holes bad.
Well, and that, like the triangle for play, right?
Yeah.
But then they told you to press play, but they never tell you to reset, right? So yeah, so I think kind of for me, I would say that the tutorial elements are kind of at that excellent level. That perhaps they could have crafted these slightly better in order to tell you things, but I'm being really nitpicky because excellent is still obviously extremely good.
I say when we're splitting hairs between whether something is excellent or prizeworthy, they've done a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, I would be happy to put it at excellent.
So the last couple of things here were, first of all, the core dynamic, and what they said. So we asked them to create something with a clear core dynamic. They said that the core dynamic was spatial reasoning, because you have to think ahead and analyze the map and then decide what to do.
Sounds pretty right, yeah.
Sounds bang on, doesn't it?
We've been given a space, we've been given some challenges, and we've been given some tools to reason our way through it.
So they said a couple of things in here. So they decided not to have a time limit because they thought the number of leaves you get per level was a sufficient restricting factor, and it might muddy the waters for their core dynamic. And I think they're probably right there. I think they could. So actually, I think they've done a really nice job with that. I think the whole game pulls in that direction. There's no external pressures. There's, I mean, I guess they've got the collection element in there, but it's definitely in service to the puzzle. Yeah, I think they've got a nice job.
Yeah.
Very, very focused.
Agreed.
So excellent would be a clear core dynamic that is supported by an integrated set of mechanics.
Yep.
Yeah.
Prizeworthy would be with other supporting dynamics. So what that would mean is that they'd have other kind of dynamics going on that, I mean, like collection, but which are in support of what they're doing. I kind of feel here like the collection stuff perhaps isn't developed enough to make that case.
So
but I think it's still definitely at the excellent level.
Yeah, so I would argue that sort of collecting these things is not inherently part of the collection dynamic. Collection is more when you're trying to sort of complete a full set of something, which it maybe kind of has. Maybe it does push it up just slightly above excellent.
You kind of are.
But in terms of like, you know, Pokemon or something like that, where it's I have my sticker book effectively, and I want to fill it with all of these different things, so I have to go and collect all of them. This is more a case of here are some extra spaces that you have to go to and reason your way to them. So
for example, one example of might be if you had different types of candy, right? And one of your jobs was to try and collect across the levels a full set of candy, right? And then some of the later levels were designed so that certain types of candy were more difficult to get than others, right? Then I would say that there was a collection dynamic that supports the main dynamic, right? Kind of going back to your Pokemon example. So, but again, we're talking at the very high level there. So I think, I mean, it's still very good. I think it's still an excellent.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the last element was feedback. So what we basically do is we ask them to give us some feedback, or rather tell us what feedback they received and how they changed the game as a result. So what they said was that at the beginning their idea was quite different because they had lots of elements that didn't support that. So they had a time limit, they had some NPCs in there, they had randomness of what collectible you would get.
interesting.
I'm not quite sure what that means.
Maybe they had different type of candy.
Yeah.
I feel that stripping out all of those things has massively improved their game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was very chaotic. So they were advised in their first feedback session to think more carefully about which of the game elements support spatial reasoning. So from a game that had the player remove pumpkins, collect different types of candy, but still choose the best path to take, and they turn it into a game that lets the player first think about where they want to go and where they're ready to start the level, and when they are ready to start the level, rather. So the time limit's gone. You can think about what you're doing, and yes, I mean I think that clearly has worked, right? They've got a much more focused puzzle game.
Not to mention, just that's given them extra time to polish everything else in it.
Yeah.
So the other thing is they had a much more extensive tutorial with a character that basically explained what to do, and they're advised not to include a lot of reading because it would bore the player. So they scratched the other character, and now the whole goal is introduced in a short sentence, and we have what we have in front of us. And again, that kind of feels to me that works as well, right? You know, because the game sort of teaches itself.
Yep. I think it'd be very boring if we had to go through read by read, click by click.
Yeah.
I think like they set up the initial goal with a few lines of text, and then, like you say, most of it is just through the level design.
Yeah. So, and then the last few little points they did through playtesting was they added the bit telling you where to put the very first leaf with the arrow, because people were finding it a bit difficult to get thinking about things. They did some tuning of the difficulties of the levels, and they played around with the interface to make things like the hearts easier to see. So yeah, I mean, all in all, I mean, those are minor things, but the first two things I think about focusing the game and about making the tutorial leaner have really worked, haven't they?
I do. I think so.
So excellent would be feedback has been interpreted and addressed, and the changes have been successful. And I think that's kind of where we are. Prizeworthy would be imaginatively addressed. So I think they've kind of I'm not quite sure it's at that level, but they've certainly followed their suggestions very successfully.
Yeah, I agree. I think for the prize-worthy, they'd need to do something that sort of like drastically surprises in their approach. Whereas we sort of they've done exactly what we expected, and it's had a profoundly positive effect on their game.
Yeah. So yeah, very nice little puzzle game, I think.
Very cute puzzle game.
Really good job. Shall we move on to the next game?
Yeah, let's.
Okay, so our next game is Just Press V.
Yeah, so we did get a little pop-up right at the start of the level that said, I think, level 1, just press V. So I am going to do as instructed, and we have a V.
Yeah.
So you can press
backspace to remove this letter and be able to spawn another one.
You can jump by pressing the spacebar. Okay, so a couple of like tutorial prompts sort of coming at the same time, but the jump one hasn't gone away yet, and I'm assuming that's because there we go.
Wait, we removed the letter with the spacebar and we're jumping with the spacebar?
No, we're removing the letter with backspace and then jumping with the
thank
spacebar. But that prompt is remaining there until I've done the thing it says, which is really nice. So if I...
So there's a door to your left as well with an exit written on it, which I presume you can't get through.
I mean, I'll go and check just to be sure. Turns out all of this is just a distraction, and we could just walk out. No.
Okay.
Not quite close enough.
So I played this in the expo, and it's a really interesting idea, where basically you get these levels. You can drop these giant 3 letters into the level, and you have to use that to try and solve the puzzle. So it's giving you that was the hint, right?
Yeah.
I love that you hadn't done it well enough yet. They're going to hint it.
Oh no, you can press tab at any time to get a hint.
Authorized letters. You can use V, and letters currently in use is in the middle. So I have to say that when those flashed up when I played this the first time, I kind of missed them. So I struggled a little bit to figure out what the thing at the middle was that was flashing. I thought I had an underscore.
Yeah. Okay, so...
But actually you have V again, right?
Yeah, so we've got V, we've got, a ramp, so I guess we'll try and do what we did last time. And... push it over. It doesn't look big enough, does it?
And it's tab to show hint if you get stuck.
Yes.
So,
let's try that again. Now that's not a big enough letter V.
No. So what do you think we should do, Age? I'm intrigued because I must say I didn't make the intuitive leap when I played it, and I'm wondering if it's more obvious to you.
I lean it against a wall. Is it possible to get it in close enough and lean?
Ooh.
So perhaps if we get the perhaps we can get the hint.
All right.
Yeah.
That might help.
Oh, yeah.
So I needed the
not
hint.
into that.
I mean, it kind of makes sense once it's there.
Yep.
I like the fact that it comes out. It's like a slightly different colour as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's
I have to say I don't think it's necessarily intuitive when you do it.
No.
Yeah, I really like it as a puzzle, and watching people play it in the expo and then get to the hint and go, oh, like every time was great.
Yeah.
But I think the way it's set up is fine. The hint needs to be more obvious because I know not everyone knew to click the hint either.
Yeah. So in fact, there you picked up two
less O's. In fact, can I remove this and then I've got a V again? No, I can't backspace and get rid of this anymore.
But you've got the O's.
But I've got 2 O's instead. So
you've got a door over there, red door,
And a red button.
and an X on the wall.
Well, I can't press X.
An authorized letter.
So we've got to put the O on the scale.
There's an X here as well.
What happens if you put the O?
So
The O at the other end, does it tip up?
So it does, but not enough. So let's leave that O there, and let's use
Can
a
you put
capital
both
O.
O's on that side? Exactly.
Yeah, capital O.
Dunk. There we go.
Very
nice.
cute.
And can I? Yep. I can.
So the only point that I made to them in the expo was that they're introducing quite a lot of elements there at the same time. So particular, they're introducing the button. They're introducing the fact that the capitals sort of weigh more than the lowercase. I mean, you could argue that's obvious, I suppose. So I did wonder whether actually spreading that out would have been a bit better.
Yeah, so if the first one is just a button in a room that you put a letter on, props it open, and then you introduce the having to fling a letter at the ceiling kind of thing.
So here we've got a riddle.
Yes.
So again, this one's bit of a break from the previous puzzles, less spatial reasoning and more, well, just here's a riddle. And I'm never a huge fan of these kinds of riddles, because if you don't know the answer, it's difficult to work out. So we do have a collection of letters at the top, so we know the answer is made out of those letters.
Yeah. It's a kind of slightly strange shift, though, isn't it, from the sorts of puzzling you had before to a kind of riddle.
I get so. I think this is the last level. I feel like if this was a setup to another puzzle where a particular letter had to go on a particular button, because that's what it's teaching, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think they make use of that further, which is a shame, because otherwise, like you say, it's a bit of a strange departure from...
Yeah. Well, let's go through the scheme and see where we end up, right? So the first one is presentation, information design, graphics, and audio. So what do we think about those elements?
So let's start. Audio's easy. It had both background and dings and bings and bobs. I think that the visuals themselves were perfectly fine. I actually loved the letters were of the right color schemes, but subtly different, both the lower cases and the capitals.
Yeah.
So I think all of that actually works really well, and I'm often not actually a fan of the 3D movement. I find it makes me sick, but this actually is doing just fine. Like it's simple enough. There's not a lot going on to be distracted. So I liked that.
Yeah, it's quite effective, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of it has a sort of consistent look, that kind of big industrial spaces, gives it a certain feel, and the music kind of works as well. It kind of
it's
fits
sort of
too.
weird, eerie, like, because it's kind of an abstract concept when it's just summoning giant letters out of nowhere. It's slightly odd and disquieting, and I think the music kind of fits that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a little bit neater around the edges, I think. So, for example, the hint button looks slightly out of.
Yeah, that's true.
Sort of, out of alignment with the rest of it. It kind of doesn't quite fit. The menu that pops up, the things that appear on screen, they're clear and you can read them, right? But they're not. They don't necessarily fit with the aesthetic of the rest of the game. Whereas some of the other things do, right? So the writing on the wall, for example, has just a really nice font that makes it look like someone has gone in and sort
just
of
scrolled it on, yeah.
Places. So I think the presentation, both graphics and audio, is probably a good level. So consistent and effective graphics, complementary audio effects and music. But the excellent would be that it's particularly appealing, and I don't think it quite gets to that level. But for me, it's sort of still good. But what about the information design?
So I'm not entirely sure about this one. I in a few ways. So I struggle a bit with those flashy things coming in. The hint came in, the levels. As they come in, they're both going too fast and too big. I couldn't take them in. On the other hand, I love the information design at the bottom, where it just says it's just telling you to do this until you actually did it. The information design about all the letters that are in your satchel is great. So it has some really good bits, and it has some bits that I'm not so fond of. The thing telling you the letter that's in use, I feel like at least this stage with the levels they've got, is a bit what's the word?
extraneous, like unneeded. Like,
Surplus.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Particularly when you've got a thing in the top left-hand corner that shows you when it goes from 1 to 0, right? So I mean, I think if you had multiple levels, like here you've got 2 O's, right? So if you place one, you don't know that you've placed one of the 2.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, so otherwise we've got like the sort of set dressing of, like, for example, red button, red door, and also
So
like
that-
an X here and an X here, sort of hinting at what we're supposed to. So that's kind of a nice little extra bit of information to it.
Yeah, I think so. The red connection definitely works and really stands out. Yeah. So I think when I did this, I didn't use a lowercase and a capital. I just used 2 lowercase letters, and I could solve the puzzle that way as well. So I don't know whether that's intentional. I just dropped it from a greater height, basically.
There it is.
Right. As long as it doesn't stick in the ceiling. Yeah.
I think you must have used the capital, because I don't think there's a way of.
No, I don't think I did, but perhaps I'm wrong.
Oh, maybe.
So the information design, I mean, all the information is shown, but I'm not quite sure it's shown clearly. It's kind of. So,
Yeah,
so-
I think that's where I am. That's exactly what it is. They've gotten all the information in there, but I'm not enamored with the clarity of it.
Yeah. So, all right, let's think about meaningful play. So, if you remember, that's mechanics, controls, and if there's any bugs. What are the controls like, Tom?
They're fine. Yeah, the movement feels relatively fluid. The jump feels like fine. It's like relatively responsive. The actually placing the letters, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to judge sort of where it's going to get placed, but
I think it's fine when you're pointing at a surface, but when you point into the air, it's kind of a bit strange.
yeah.
It's like, where's it going to go, basically?
Oh, I've lost
And
a
how
team.
far away is it going to be? Yeah.
So
So they kind of,
The depth perception of the letters is yes.
yeah. So like if you point at a wall and click, where does it go? Does it go on? If you try dropping it's gone right against as far as it could, is it? Or,
yeah, I think so. And I think that's partly just going to be a limitation of trying to do this in 3D anyway.
Yeah.
well, I mean, you could have had mechanisms for deciding how far away it went, as well as
Yeah,
what vector it goes on.
you could like summon like a ghost version of it, and then
Yeah,
like
then
confirm if you like. But again, for
don't-
like these level of puzzles, I'm not sure that's
Yeah,
entirely
they
needed.
don't need them for this. And presumably, are there things on the ceiling there so you can click at those as well? Or just click at the bottom.
I don't think so.
So the controls we think are pretty reasonable. But what about the set of mechanics going on? There's kind of, what have we got? We've got obviously the placing the letters. We've got the jumping. We've got the red button. We've got these pads. We've got the
Seesaws and physics and
the seesaw lever thing going on. So there's a fair bit of stuff. Interesting question. Do you think they're complementary?
I think that some of them are complementary. So
Yeah. I mean, actually thinking about the mechanics, I think because actually we might get onto this when we get onto the level design. There's kind of an inconsistency in the way that you solve the puzzles, but the actual mechanics, I think, the letters.
yeah, maybe that's what I'm reacting to.
yeah, I would agree
Yeah.
with that. I think the actual mechanics are all about placing letters and shifting the letters around, and I think that all works well together. I think it's like we were saying earlier, the sort of the solutions to the puzzles don't necessarily follow on from one another.
So I guess we'll get to that when we get to the kind of level design bit. So for meaningful play, good would be a set of complementary mechanics, reasonable set of smooth usable controls, and the game is reasonably complex with infrequent minor bugs. Have we seen any bugs?
Occasionally the sort of letters get a bit stuck in the ceiling, but beyond that, no, not really. So something I realised, where you don't have to look at the letter to press backspace and delete it, it will just delete them in the order that you place them. So that kind of gets around that.
So I think maybe for the bugs thing, I think the game is reasonably complex, and there are no obvious bugs. So maybe for meaningful play, it's sort of halfway between good and excellent.
I agree.
Yeah. So we kind of the bugs being the excellent bit. Yeah. Okay, so let's think about the brief then, and the level design. So remember this was goals, risks, and rewards, and the pacing as you go through the game. So do we have a clear set of goals and risks and rewards going on?
We have goals. I'm not sure what the risks are. And the rewards is getting through the next door, which is very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is one level of reward, right? I mean, you either progress or you don't.
Yes. Yeah, you don't get any extra things for getting it through in minimum number of moves or...
There's no kind of... Yeah. There's no sort of score, as it were, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it feels to me that, as you said, I think the goals are there, fine. It's the risks and rewards thing that's a bit missing, isn't it? Just very simplistic.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, how might you have encouraged that? Well,
So yeah, scoring based on, for example, the number of letters you use or the number of times you have to replace it.
Yeah.
Or
so if you're going for the puzzle thing, you'd go for the elegance of your solution. You could try and add in some extra elements, though it's risky. So you could put some collection elements in here. So, you know, if you were trying to collect a certain number of things, and the more you collect, the higher your score. Or you could have had a timer. That does push you towards different dynamics than they're going for potentially, but if done carefully, I think would have added in some of those those additional goals, giving you the risk reward elements. So I feel it's a little bit lacking on that aspect. The pacing.
in terms of, I guess, overall difficulty, it ramps up. No pun intended.
Yeah.
Although, again, sort of going to the puzzles have the difference in solutions for each one doesn't necessarily make it feel like it's a smooth escalation of pacing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of these are the sorts of puzzles where if you don't know what the solution is, you're just stuck. There's not necessarily a feeling of progressing through the puzzle until you know how to solve it. Once you know how to solve it, implementing it is relatively easy.
So for the pacing thing, the difference would be satisfactory would be that the tension rises over time, and good would be it rises over time in a coherent pattern. And I think what we're saying here is that it does rise over time, right? They get more complex and more sophisticated, but it just feels a little bit chaotic in the way that it does it. So that element is probably satisfactory. The goals, risks, and rewards, again, satisfactory would be a coherent set of goals, risks, and rewards. A pass would be a limited set of goals, risks, and rewards. And I think the problem is here that the goals are clear, but the risks and rewards themselves are a bit limited.
Yep.
So I think probably for level design, it's between a pass and a satisfactory.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right, really.
What about the tutorial element?
So the initial tutorial bit I quite liked.
Yeah, it talks. That first room is really quite simple, and it teaches you.
Anyway, we'll go back and
talks
look
nicely
at it
through the solution, right?
There you go. So just press V. There we go. Wait for OBS to catch up. Here we go.
I mean, the only thing it doesn't tell you is that you need the key to get through the door. But I mean, that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, like nice shiny gold spinning thing. Like players are magpies, they'll be like, ooh, want it. So that's fine, I think. Press V to spawn the letter. That doesn't go away until you actually do it. This is a bit odd. The fact that that's such a different prompt to the others and it shows up at the same time as another one is a bit odd.
Yes, your attention's on sort of several different things, right? You're trying to read the new hint. You're probably trying to do something because you placed the letter and you're probably rushing forward to do something with it.
I just realised I can place down a capital V in this one.
No. So, yeah.
But then when we almost fell off. When we get through this, so good points. Only introducing this UI when it becomes necessary, even if we're not sure it is super necessary. I don't. On the one, actually no. I'm going to say I like it. Like they only introduce that UI when they feel it becomes necessary. They give a short hint telling you what it does, but then that fades out because for the most part it's self-explanatory.
I mean, for tutorial, good would be gradual explanation of gameplay and controls fully aligned with the play. And I think they've achieved that, right? They introduce the elements as you need them, they give you the prompts contextually as you go through the level, so all of that is kind of there. I think the issue would be, excellent would be that those are sometimes communicated through level design. Now, sometimes you might argue they are, so for example up here,
like the button for example, that's it. As a result of that, I would be inclined to... Oh, and the fact that you can pick up other letters. Again, not... So this is a mechanic that is introduced for seemingly nowhere else have we had to pick up the letters, we've just always been given them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's slightly odd that they're just smaller versions of the big ones, rather than, say, sort of Scrabble-like tiles that you actually have in your instruments.
On the other hand, they are spinning just like the key was. That was a collectible, so...
Yeah.
But again, it's a thing that's introduced and not used again, so I'll talk about that again in a moment. But for example, the button and the door, that's introduced through the level design. It could be introduced better, like you were saying, like if they had one that was just a button on the ground and then a door and then a puzzle like this. But I would say this is maybe between good and excellent, because they do introduce some of those things through the actual design of the level.
You're right. There are definitely one or two elements done that way. Core dynamic. So they said that they believed their core dynamic was spatial reasoning. And they said the final puzzle deviates from this slightly, motivated by desire to relieve tension after what we uncovered to be quite a difficult level during our play testing.
Okay, it's interesting that they've said that, because now I sort of see where they're coming from. But I would say usually you want your last level to be the climax. You want it to be the most tense point.
Yes. I still think that it would be better if they didn't have this last level, and instead they had an earlier level between the first two, which introduced the idea of the button, basically.
So this shows that they're aware that this deviates from their core dynamic is the thing. Overall, ignoring this level, very clearly spatial reasoning. It's all about manipulating objects into places to get you through a space. Perfect. I feel like this bit does take away from it, and they know that is the thing.
Yeah. So good would be a clear core dynamic supported by the primary mechanics.
I think it definitely hits that.
And excellent would be supported by an integrated set of mechanics.
It's almost there. It's just that the mechanics are, as we've said, a bit of a mixed bag, and a lot gets introduced and then dropped.
Yep.
Yeah. I think maybe here we go for good. They've got a good set of mechanics that support that core dynamic, but they just, unfortunately, they've got almost like a secondary word game at the end. It just kind of takes away from that a little bit, but still good, I think.
Okay, so next is
the last thing, in fact, is feedback. So what they said was, so they said that they were told to do the importance of level design through tutorialisation. So I think what they mean was teaching through the level.
Yep.
And slowly introducing concepts to gradually build up the player's knowledge. Right? They said, for example, level 1 and level 2. So you get introduced to the idea of letter placement, and then you essentially get the same puzzle, but this time the platform is higher, and you have to do the uppercase letter.
That's it.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That.
I think they've been partially successful there, right? It just feels like they've not quite embraced that for all of the elements of their game. But it does work.
So like the first two puzzles I super agree with. Like they introduced this because I don't think I've said this yet. I really like this mechanic of just putting down giant letters. Like it's a really neat and novel thing.
Yeah. In fact, I asked them where they got it from. I wondered if they'd seen it in another game somewhere. But as far as I can tell, it was just something they came up with. So it's quite a cool idea.
Yeah. So there is that sort of like first level, relatively simple, like easy to do, just sort of like by bumping around and bumping into things. Then they repeat the puzzle, but with a bit of a twist. So these first two, I think, sort of has that. Learning through the sort of design of the level. Like, this thing is bigger, therefore I must need a bigger letter kind of thing.
Yeah. But then they kind of lose that afterwards, I think.
Yeah.
The next thing they said was that they were told to gradually introduce the UI elements so as not to overwhelm the player. And that does work, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
And they said another suggestion was to reveal prompts via a timer-based system.
Yes, which I don't think they do, apart from maybe the hint, the thing telling you to press tab.
Yeah. So I think they've definitely responded to their feedback. Good would be feedback has been addressed and changes have been successful. Excellent would be that they've been interpreted in some way. So I think they have directly applied the feedback they've got. Satisfactory would be somewhat successful. They have been successful.
I feel like it's sort of erring towards satisfactory because, like we say, the first part, really good, definitely takes that on board, has that slow progression, but then, as we've said a couple of times, I mean,
maybe
between the two?
because they've also done the element with the UI, and I think that does work. Maybe halfway between the two.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Good. So nicely executed, really interesting mechanic. And as a result, quite an intriguing game.
Okay, fantastic. Let's move on to the next one.
Move on to the next game.
Okay, and this one is Trick or Treat.
Brilliant. Okay, so a kind of intriguing looking game, like the big pair of eyes.
Yeah, some interesting music. It was quite loud. I've had to turn it down quite a bit. I'm not sure it fits the aesthetic they're going for, but we shall see. Okay.
It feels a little bit, in terms of the graphics, it feels a little bit mishmashy, and I actually wonder whether it's the music that's causing that. So what are you doing now? You're collecting stuff.
So yeah.
Why are you collecting things?
It said collect candies. 1 point. 1 point. 1 point.
But not the cauldrons.
Oh, cauldron's bad. Cauldron full of candy, good. Okay. So they get me 100 points. Each candy gets me 1 point. So I feel like I should just ignore the candies and just go for the
50 points. Yeah, who cares about the candies? Get those cauldrons.
Okay. But I don't want...
If you get an empty cauldron, it wipes your score.
Yes. So we've got a timer in the top right as well.
Yeah, okay. There's no penalty to letting the candies fall on the floor.
Doesn't seem to be... Oh, that's a good cauldron. Okay. So it looks like I'm just going to be doing this for another minute. I guess we...
Let a candy fall. I just want to see if it... No, it doesn't. Okay. Alright, so you've got a...
Ooh, 10... So candy corns give you plus 10 seconds. So I could be here for longer.
Which give you plus 10 seconds, sorry?
One of the types of candy. The little triangle ones.
Oh.
Okay. Ooh, that... Something said double score then. but I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
Shall we crack on with the mark scheme then?
Yeah, I think I was intrigued to see what would happen when you got down to the bottom of the timer.
Well, we can
I
wait
want
and
to
see.
see whether there's a second level to this, or did you play this in the expo?
I don't think I did. No.
No, it's the first time I've seen it as well. So yeah, okay. Seems to be doing pretty well anyway. Pretty rough to catch a cauldron now.
Okay, so that looks like the end of it.
So that's it. All right. Okay. So simple little game. Got to collect the falling candy. Yeah, let's go through it. So presentation. What do we think? So this is basically information design, graphics, and audio.
I don't hate it. It's like you
so
say.
the graphics are they're clear.
It feels like a
quite-
little bit of a mishmash,
Little bit, yeah.
but overall,
I sort of they're clearly going for a sort of Halloween theme with the candy and the haunted house and all that kind of stuff.
like the music does feel a little bit off, but
Yeah.
on the plus side, it's fast paced, it's upbeat, it's sort of in keeping, I guess, with the general
Yeah. Okay.
tone of the mechanics, at least.
And what about information design? So you've got your score, you've got the timer. I quite like the timer. That's a quite nice visual representation.
Yep,
Means you
we've
don't
got
have to,
the
you've got a very quick sense of how much time you've got left.
flashing hints every time I pick something up.
Although I keep missing those, but yeah.
So
What about the actual design of the candies themselves and the things that are falling and
So-
some of the behaviour you mentioned, like double points and that kind of stuff?
So that's what I was going to bring up next. It's interesting that the good thing and the bad thing, which is the cauldron and the cauldron full of candy, look so similar. I'm not sure
Yes.
how I feel about that. On the one hand, it
No.
leads to an interesting risk and reward thing of, what was it actually a good one or a bad one? Should I go for it? Should I not? Quick decide kind of thing.
What it makes me wonder is whether they should have had an intermediate object that was sort of, plus 10 candy or something. And then one of the problems they've got. I mean, this isn't quite about the presentation. One of the problems they've got, as you said, is the fact that the candies are only worth 1 point, so they're almost worthless, right?
Yeah.
If they'd mixed it up, so the candies were worth 1 point. You had some super candy that dropped that was worth, I don't know, 5 or 10 points. And then every now and again, a cauldron of candies dropped that was worth a big bonus, like 25 points.
So in a way, that's kind of what they've got. It's just the scales off. So they've got 1 points, 50 points, and times 2 points.
So what's the times 2 points is little triangles, yeah.
No, the triangles are plus 10 seconds. It's the little blue ones that...
Okay.
I'll see if I can... I'll point one out when I see one.
All right. So.
But that's the thing. The weighting of the points feels sort of inherently odd.
So I guess we'll get to that.
Yeah, sorry, we're still on aesthetics, aren't we? So information design.
I'm the one who went off on a tangent. So yeah, but information design wise, I don't know. I don't know if I like the fact that you actually have to interact with the thing to see what it does.
Yes, although I'm not sure how I'd communicate it otherwise. Like the first time is... Yeah, that's kind of the... It's a Halloween-y themed thing. I feel like catching a cauldron... Like, a cauldron isn't inherently a terrible thing to catch.
No.
Especially given that the heavier cauldron that's actually full of stuff is a good thing to catch. So...
Yeah.
Not...
So it feels like that isn't clear, right?
That said, it's not...
I mean, maybe it's something that just needed some iconography somewhere to say that the cauldrons, avoid the cauldrons or something.
That said,
but
it's
again,
not too detrimental the first time you pick it up, as long as... So...
No, that's true actually. Yeah. So okay, so if we think about presentation then, satisfactory would be most key information is shown, there are consistent graphics, and there are some audio effects and music. The graphics,
So we don't have.
reasonably consistent, I think.
Yeah.
And I know what you said. It feels like
Some of
the choices are odd, but it sort of works.
There are a couple of little
there are
bits here and there,
definitely
like
effects and music.
yeah.
I
So-
wouldn't say
so-
they're complementary, but
So there aren't effects and music. There's just music.
good point. Thank you.
At least that I can tell.
So that would be pass. Some audio effects or music.
Yeah.
So we've got some audio effects or music, consistent graphics. Most key information is shown versus some attempted information design.
I think most of it is shown.
Most of it's shown.
Like obviously,
I think the problem is there's not a huge amount to show, right?
yeah, exactly. I think there's definitely things that they could have improved with it. For example, having in the last 10 seconds, having a clock ticking sound, for example, just to sort of give that extra bit of feedback and things like that, or a little ding when you collect a good thing, and similar things for the visual design. But what they've got isn't terrible.
So I think overall for presentation, that's sort of somewhere between a satisfactory and a pass, but kind of leaning towards the satisfactory space.
Yeah, agreed.
So let's think about the actual play, meaningful play. So these are the mechanics, the controls, and if there are any bugs.
Okay, so controls-wise, feels quite smooth. There's not a lot to it. It's just moving left and right, but the movement feels good. Like I don't ever feel like I've been sort of trapped into picking up something I didn't want to, kind of thing.
Yeah, you haven't got any sort of weird momentum going on or anything.
Yeah.
You've got some acceleration happening. It looks to me like you start off slower than you.
Yeah, it feels like relatively sort of fluid and natural movement. In terms of mechanics, there's not a huge amount of mechanics, and I think that's going to be a bit of an issue.
Yes.
There's things that... So there's collecting stuff, and those things have different effects. There are 4 different effects. So there's points, losing points, timer, and I guess doubling points.
Yes, not an awful lot else going on. And bugs. I don't think there are any bugs, right?
No, but again, that's possibly partly down to it being a relatively simple prototype.
So let's have a look at this. So let's start. If we look at say the mechanics aspect of it, right? Mm-hmm. So pass would be a set of mechanics, but they're a bit inconsistent. Satisfactory would be a set of consistent mechanics, and poor would be few mechanics. So it feels to me like the mechanics that they do have kind of consistent. They kind of work, but there isn't many of them.
Yeah, so perhaps partway between the 2 of those then.
Yeah, so that'd be sort of between the poor and the pass.
Sorry, what was it? What was a pass one more time?
So the pass would be few mechanics. So sorry, a pass would be a set of inconsistent mechanics, or a set of mechanics but they're inconsistent.
Oh, that's interesting, because I don't think they're inconsistent. I just think there's few.
But I still think the few mechanics would be poor. So I think it kind of is between the 2. I think they've got.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So controls, pass would be few or challenging controls. So we don't think the controls are challenging, but
there's few. I have 2 controls, left and right.
So I think that's got to be at the pass level. Bugs. So there aren't any bugs, but it comes down to the complexity, right? So pass would be game is simple, and poor would be game is very simple. It's an interesting question. It's certainly simple.
Yeah.
Maybe between the 2, it feels like the very simple is for games where there's almost like just one mechanic, which you just sort of repeatedly use. Like sort of endless runner type games can be a bit like that.
I'd say it's verging on that, but yeah.
Again, we could possibly put it between the 2, between poor and a pass.
Yeah. I think it could be.
But yeah, it is pretty simple. You had a menu and everything at the beginning, didn't you?
Yeah.
So let's put it between the 2, because it has all the kind of paraphernalia you'd expect with a game. right? So it gives you a kind of an end screen, it gives you a menu, it kind of does those kind of things. Let's think about the level design, because my feeling is this is where this is where they're going to get into some trouble.
This is something I spoke to them about during the labs, where they sort of pitched this concept. And so having this sort of constrained space that you're working with obviously sort of makes it harder to design a level. So the design in this case only comes from the sorts of stuff that's falling.
Yes, and your abilities, right, and what you can, the mechanics that are in the game.
So
the level design bit is about goals, risks, rewards, and pacing.
And if, for example, you designed it so that more stuff started falling towards the end, or more dangerous stuff started falling towards the end, so you're sort of really pressured to get those extra time things sort of through a hail of cauldrons or whatever, that would be sort of an example of sort of level design within this constrained space. I feel like there isn't a lot of difference.
But there isn't. There's almost no progression, is there?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the only thing that goes up is that the consequence of picking the cauldrons increases because your score gets bigger.
Which is...
But that's pretty flimsy.
It is, but it is something.
It is something, yeah. So as I said, this is goals, risks, rewards, and pacing. So a pass here would be a limited set of goals, risks, and rewards, and tension somewhat rises over time. What are the goals, risks, and rewards? Well, I guess your goals is to get the candy. The risk is whether or not you try and dive under one of those cauldrons to get something.
Yeah, and for example, do I go for like something that gives me more time versus more score? Like, they have all the ingredients of reasonable goals, risks, and rewards there.
Just perhaps it's not, but this is the balancing thing we talked about earlier on.
Yeah.
Poor would be an incoherent or very limited set of goals, risks, and rewards. I don't think they're incoherent.
Yeah.
I think they're a little bit off, but they're there. They are pretty limited, though.
I don't think they're that limited. I think they're possibly a step above that.
So pass would be a limited set of goals, risks, and rewards. I think if we're debating it, we can give them the benefit of the doubt.
Just for the sake of argument, what would a satisfactory be for goals, risks, and rewards?
That would be a coherent set of goals, risks, and rewards.
See, I'm almost inclined to say maybe halfway between a pass and a satisfactory, because again, they have the ingredients for it, like the actual, like sort of, oh, should I try and get more time, or should I get that double point thing? Which one do I want to sort of prioritize in the moment?
Yeah.
Like the moment.
I just don't feel it works especially well. Maybe because of the balance between the things.
I think this is it. I'm looking at it as a sort of moment-to-moment kind of thing. So in the moment, which way do I go, left or right kind of thing. But you're right, across the scope of the whole level and the whole game, it sort of becomes meaningless because there's limited sort of pacing or change throughout the level.
But I think you've convinced me that the satisfactory, the pass is they definitely hit a pass.
Yeah.
So for the pacing, pass is tension somewhat rises over time. Poor is variations in tension but no coherent pattern over time.
So
absolutely pacing is flat.
I don't think it's poor. I think because they have a timer, they kind of have an inherent pacing thing. They could emphasize that a lot more with, for example, some of the audio choices, like having a countdown sort of really pressuring you as the time gets lower. They have some mechanics that let you sort of try and extend it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like you say, the cauldrons become inherently more punishing the closer you get to the end because you've got a higher score and less time to recover it if you hit it. So I think there actually is pacing. I don't know how.
So pass would be tension somewhat rises over time, and it feels like it's almost there, but it is just that interaction of the consequence of the cauldron, right? And I think because there's such a lack of variation in the actual, because as far as I can tell, there's no difference between what falls in the first 10 seconds and what falls in the last 10 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I would say maybe put it between a pass and a poor, and kind of say, look, you do have a rise in tension, but it's very slight, and it's just through that that kind of dynamic.
Yeah, I'm definitely inclined to agree.
What about a tutorial?
It's very lacking, but again,
What was there?
There was a. Well, I'll show you in 36 seconds, but basically there's a little text pop-up that says arrow keys to move, and that's about it. That immediately disappears before I've had a chance to demonstrate that I understood it or even read it.
I mean, it does tell you the consequence of picking stuff up, so a point.
Does.
Right, but yeah. I think the problem is that, again, it's because there's no variation. So, if you played something where how would you teach someone with this, right? So you might have a little bit that isn't timed where you pick up candy, right, and you collect points.
Yep.
Right, and then you might have something like a rain of cauldrons, which makes it essentially impossible to avoid, that wipes out the points that you've just had to collect.
Ah,
right?
Interesting.
So now it's told you about that, right? And then maybe you could have something where you introduce the super cauldron. And maybe the super cauldron initiates the start of the game proper, right?
Yeah.
And then what you've done is you've told everybody what all the stuff does.
Catch the candies left and right.
Yeah. So I think there is a tutorial here. It's not absent, but it's about as minimal as you can get, right?
Yeah, like that's so we've got a limited set of mechanics to tutorialize, and they've done the absolute minimal to introduce those few mechanics. Is the thing.
So a pass here would be a gradual explanation of gameplay and controls revealed as you play, right? And it doesn't do that.
No.
A poor would be some explanation of gameplay and controls, and absent would be no serious attempt at a tutorial. So I mean,
almost absent, I would say.
I mean, I would say we might put them between the two because they've got at least something.
Yes,
right?
I definitely like you say, it's definitely not absent. They have something. It's just.
But it is. I think if it was more complex and they flashed up a thing at the beginning where they told you about those complexities,
well,
then for example, might hit the poor. But there's so little to explain.
Even for example, if they had taken on board some of the principles that we explained in the lectures. So, for example, holding that message there until I'd moved left and right.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's a shame because they could have added it in relatively simply by just having phases, and even having an actual tutorial level, right? So having a tutorial level where you went through this process versus the game itself, and having that choice at the beginning. Right. I mean, just those minor things I think would have made a big difference.
Yes.
What about the core dynamic?
What did they say it was?
So they said it's collection.
I can see why they've said that.
Your goal is to get as many points as possible, and you've got 5 different types of of collectibles. Lollipops add 1 point. Triangle candy gives you 10 seconds. Twisted candy doubles your current score.
Yep.
Cauldron gives you 50 points, and empty one resets it. So yeah, they say collection.
So as I've mentioned earlier, I'm not sure. So yes, we're collecting stuff. I'm not sure it necessarily fits that dynamic because I always see collection as sort of more about completing a set rather than just getting points. But with that said, I'm not sure which way I would lean for what I think their actual core dynamic is. Survival, maybe, except...
yeah, it's a weird mix. The cauldron thing and the timer kind of pushes it a bit towards survival. You've got to get through this with as much as you possibly can.
Like, if the presence of those candies that extend your time, they were more prevalent, then it would feel like I have to keep collecting those so that I can keep getting more points kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. I think I would almost call this a survival game because it's because if it was just a timer and no way of extending it, it wouldn't be. Because they are there, it to me feels like see if you can get a better score than you did last time. See if you can last that a little bit longer kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I would interpret the collection thing I think a bit looser than you. So I kind of think collect as much stuff as you can to get points. For me, that would count as a collection.
Fair enough.
but I think that there is this element of survival to it, right? And actually, the whole theme of it, the fact they've gone with a Halloween theme, kind of pushes you in that direction as well. So it's just a little bit muddied, I think. So let's have a look at what we said. So pass would be an attempt at a core dynamic, but it's not well supported by the primary mechanics. Satisfactory would be a clear core dynamic that is partially supported by the primary mechanics.
I think it's probably there then. I'm happy to take your definition for collection.
Yeah,
and again, we're back to the problem of there's just not enough mechanics to.
There's not much to support it, and you've got that one that detracts from it a little bit, right? But yeah, I think it's kind of okay. Feedback. So what they said was think more about player agency and avoid situations that only had one answer. And the existence of the poison cauldron, which kills the player, may swerve the core dynamic to survival, depending on how frequently it appears. Right?
Interesting.
Which is kind of what we were just saying, right? And you also pointed out that the adding the time thing does that as well. At the time we were given the feedback, all of our collectibles were falling randomly at randomized positions, one at a time. After the feedback, we grouped the collectibles into two different categories, a random and bonus. The random consisted of lollipops, the cauldron full of candies, and the empty cauldron, and the bonus consisted of the twisted candy and triangular candy, so the double and the extra time. Collectibles in the random category were generated randomly at random positions, but the collectibles in the bonus category would fall at the same time but at different ends of the screen, which gives you a choice of whether you want to choose one or the other.
So that's really interesting. So that's
I hadn't even noticed that, but
so neither had I. But again, that sort of goes back to the sort of moment-to-moment risk versus reward that I was talking about. There you go. You have to make that choice between do I want the extra points or the extra time. There we go. We can see an example of it there.
I see what they're saying. Right, so you've got a choice. So that's quite subtle, but sort of works. I mean, to a certain extent, your choice is sort of dictated by which side of the screen you happen to be on.
I don't know. You can move relatively fast.
But in theory, I get it. Yeah, so that's interesting.
That's it. I hadn't noticed this before, but now I know that that's the case. It is quite obvious.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So they have responded. Let's have a look at what we said. So satisfactory would be feedback was addressed and the changes have been somewhat successful. Pass would be feedback was addressed, but the changes have had limited success. So the point here was about to give the player more agency. So really this is about the solution they've implemented, how much agency has it actually given the player? Because I think they have done something to address what they said, but I'm not convinced it's been hugely successful.
I will say I think it's like really the only or the main agency within the game.
Yeah. But there's always nothing else, right? And again, the problem is they've got so few mechanics to work with, right? So having some kind of power that perhaps affected what was falling, or if you had some sort of power up that had a limited time and then you're choosing when to use that power up, these are all things that give you opportunities for agency. But if you haven't got those mechanics in your game, those opportunities simply aren't there, right? So I think that they've so pass would be feedback was addressed, but the changes have had limited success, and I think that's kind of where they are, right? They've addressed the feedback. It has improved things. It's quite nice actually. It's quite I say it's subtle, but it seems to work. But I think in terms of addressing the fundamental problem of limited agency, it's had limited success.
I think that's definitely fair.
Okay, so a simple game that kind of works, but just a couple of extra mechanics, I think, would have made a big difference in quite a lot of ways. I think. Some attempt at a tutorial would, a more complex tutorial element would have made a big difference too.
Yeah, I think that's something that's worth mentioning. Sort of like a standalone game. It is quite simple, but it is nice and fun and playable. I think the problem that they've had is that it's not necessarily fit the brief that they were set.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I think that's our last game. So we'll finish up here and we'll see you in the next video.
See you then.